All right, morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, either post them. If you're on a mobile device, it's going to be below the video. If you're on a laptop, desktop, computer, it's going to be to the right of the video. I usually start with questions that were asked up to an hour before, so I'll start with Andrew's question. The reason why I do that is I just want to make sure that I'm answering questions for people who I think are actually here, waiting to see them get answered. If you posted your question last night, odds are you're not here. So that's the reason why I do that. But on Fridays, I typically address something in the beginning of the office hours. That's a very common question that I get. So I get members ask me this all the time. What is the move? Can you summarize it for me? Because there seems to be some confusion about what the move actually is. So let's simplify it and let's understand why we want to be doing it. So the move is essentially getting the club on plane and or underneath the plane or underneath the plane a little bit and squaring the face earlier in the swing. So basically getting the club on plane and square as soon as possible in the downswing. Because when you do that, now you can just turn and rotate into the golf ball as much as you can. So in order to get that to happen, we need to, as we come down, because typically when you go up to the top, this club is steeper to the plane and or above the plane. So if you look at somebody like Matt Wolff, right? Matt Wolff, he brings this club up really, really steep and he gets his hands up pretty high. From here, if he were to just come down from this and keep this club in that same direction, right, he would be coming down like this. And this is what I see all the time with with amateur players. When they get down to lead arm parallel to the ground in the downswing, this club is in a steep position. And a lot of times the face is open, right? So that's going to lead to over the top or early extension, one or the other. Because the over the top is just where you're just kind of continuing to come down steep. And the early extension is the late compensation to get the club to work from the inside. Because when I stand up, when I have that early extension, the handle raises up, the club head drops underneath. The problem is with that, now I'm flipping. I'm releasing that club early, right? And we don't want to be doing that because we're going to be losing compression and so on and so forth when we do that. And your swing is going to become very, very dependent on timing, which makes it a little bit more difficult to be consistent. So what we want to do, what we see what Matt Wolff does, and basically every tour player, is no matter where they have this club at the top, as they start down, that club gets moved into basically an on-plane position. So basically, if you draw a line, if I'm set up here, right, if I'm set up here at address, and you drew a line from the hosel of the club up through my right elbow here, it's what we call the elbow plane. Typically, what I like to see is I like to see this club, when that lead arm gets parallel to the ground, I like to see this club either parallel to that plane, that elbow plane line, or even a little bit shallower to it, right? So I'm here, and then the club is shallowing, right? That's one part of the move there. And the hands in relationship to that line can be on the line and can be a little bit above the line, as long as essentially by the time it gets down here, those hands, by the time the hands get to waist level, you want to see those hands on that line. And again, the club shallower or on that plane line. And that's going to get you to where you're working from the inside nicely, and you're able to keep rotating. You don't have to make a compensation in the swing to get the club on plane. It's already there. You can just keep turning through there. So that's why a part of the move is important. And also, the second part is getting that face square earlier. So, we're breaking it into two components here, but it's really one move. So when we're squaring the face earlier, that's coming from the twisting of the handle here. So that's my lead wrist going like that, my trail wrist going like that. If you have your wrists really, really cupped like this, odds are the face is open, and you're going to need to kind of flip and roll the hands over hard at impact to get that face squared up. If I've already got this face squared up as I'm coming down, now I can continue to rotate, and boom, I'm in there. I'm square at impact, and I have some forward shaft lean. Everything looks really, really good. So we don't want to feel like as we're coming through impact, like we have to do something last minute to get the face to square up. We want to get that already. We want to create that structure as we're coming down initially. So that way we can rotate hard through the golf ball and get great compression on the ball. We can get the face really, really square. I mean, you want to feel like that club's really whipping through there and it's just square and on plane every single time. Whereas if you don't have this move in place, it's going to be difficult to be consistent because you're going to have to make a compensation somewhere in the swing. And that's where early extension, releasing the club early, rolling the hands over, flipping the hands, chunks, tops, and things like that. It's hard to be consistent when you're making that last second adjustment, because things in the downswing are moving super fast. The downswing is typically about a quarter of a second. So things are moving really fast. So we talk about it's the move because it really is one move. It's one thing that's happening. Now there's components to it, like basically what shallows the club. There's several things, but basically we have forearm rotation, right? So forearm rotation is what helps shallow the club. We've got what's called external rotation in my arm. So if my elbow is staying out like that, it's going to be hard for me to shallow the club. So I need that arm, my bone here in my arm, my humerus in my shoulder here needs to be externally rotating to get that club to shallow out. If I'm like that, I'm going to have a hard time shallowing out. So I need the club to work in like that. So that's a piece of it, right? And then we have the wrist movements that square the face. So that's going to be mostly this here. If you look at here, that's what's squaring the face. If I have it like this, you can see that closes the face. If I get right here and I have this club shallowed out and I have that face already square, I can continue to turn, stay in my posture, and get some much better compression on the golf ball. And that's basically what all tour players do. That's how they're able to be very, very consistent. So hopefully that clears components is the tennis racket. So in the tennis racket drill, the reason why we use a tennis racket is that it's just easier to visualize exactly what's going on. So with this tennis racket strings, I can easily see where these strings are pointing at all times. And you can also get in some good reps at home without, breaking a lamp or putting a hole through your ceiling or something like that, right? So what you do is you bring this up to the top. As if it was a golf club, you're going to bring it up to the top. And as you're doing that, you're going to get the strings pointing to the sky and also twisting the handle at the same time. This is the move to get the club face square and shallowed out as your arm gets as your lead arm gets to parallel in the downswing. That's going to get you to where you're nice and squared up, and then rotate and allow you to rotate through the golf ball. So that's in the move course. That's 1.3 in the move. I highly recommend you go through the entire course. But if you're struggling with early extension, you're struggling with flipping, you're struggling with chunks, tops, there's lots of reasons why that could be happening. But a good, thin shots is also a big one. If you're looking at your swing on video and you see this club is steep, and you see as you're coming into contact, you're going like this, you're standing up and flipping the club, or you're steep and you just kind of continue over the top, the move is going to be an excellent course for you to get this club more on plane earlier in the swing and get that face squaring earlier. So that way you can start hitting much more solid shots. So you start out basically trying to hit smother hooks. And when you do that, I'm telling you, when you start hitting those smother hooks, those things feel so solid because you're de-lofting the face. And don't worry, you're gonna straighten that out. If you're hitting smother hooks initially, that's what we want. And then you're gonna start to straighten that out toward the end of the course. So highly recommend, go check out that course. If you want to start hitting more compressed shots, transferring more energy to the golf ball, and you don't want to feel like at the end, like you got to make some sort of compensation, in the downswing to get to where you can even hit the golf ball where you want it to go, then I highly recommend this course because it puts you in a position early in the swing. So that way you can turn hard into the golf ball and just let that club whip through there and get some easy distance and speed. So highly recommend it. To get to the move course, just click the house icon at the top of the page. That'll take you to the home page. And then when you scroll down on the home page, you'll find a list of all the courses there, and you can select the move from there. The other thing I recommend is if you're having trouble with this, because it is a difficult thing to do. I'm not going to tell you that it's super easy to do, but if you're serious about getting into the move and getting this ingrained in your swing, you want to do it as quickly as possible. I highly recommend you do it with unlimited swing reviews. I have several students right now making great progress on working on the move, because I'll be able to pinpoint exactly what's going on there and be able to help you out. So if you're interested in that, go to the top of the page there where it says get a review, and go to the swing review page. I don't know if I have spots available right at this second. If I do have a spot available, go ahead and grab it. If not, join the waiting list. So that way you can be on the list of people who get an email whenever I open up spots. I try to open up spots every month or so, or every month or two. I can't make any promises because just work and everything. I want to give all my students the time that they deserve, so I don't want to have so many students that I'm spread out pretty thin. So yeah, if you're interested, join that waiting list, so that way you can get notified, because otherwise you may not get notified. I typically sell out to the waiting list. In fact, I think this year, every time that I've opened up spots, I think I've sold out to the waiting list. Haven't sent out an email to everybody yet. So make sure that you join that waiting list, so that way you can be notified. But hey, if there's a spot available, go ahead and grab it, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so like I said, I'll start here with Andrew S. says, do you think it's wise to feel the extension in the right wrist at the top of the backswing and flexion of the flexion of left wrist right before impact instead of trying to do it at the beginning of the downswing? Have you had clients talk about the bending of the wrist hurting? Should we do exercises for our wrist too? You can be, the wrists have to work together, right? So the extension, when you're talking about extension's where the wrist is bending back. That's this motion, the wrist bending back. So we call that knuckles back a lot of the time. So that's what we call wrist extension. At the top of the swing, your wrist, you should have some right wrist extension, right? Pretty much as you can. Most people can get about a 60-degree angle. If you want to know if you're a 60-degree angle, a 6-iron has a lie angle of 60 degrees. So if you take your 6-iron like this is a wedge, so it's going to be, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be a little bit steeper. But yeah, you can have, if you're getting to where you're laying this on your forearm and you're touching that means that you have adequate mobility in that wrist to be able to get that right wrist extension. So if you're getting here and you only can bring your wrist up that much, then it's just going to be physically, it's going to be more difficult for you to get. It doesn't mean it's not possible. I mean, when you come into impact, you don't have to have a lot of wrist extension at impact to have forward shaft lean, but typically it's going to be here, right? It's going to be maxed out here, and then you're going to be releasing a little bit. So if you can only get to here at this point, it's typically going to be harder to not release that as you're coming into impact. Now, as far as wrist exercises go, you can maybe go see a physical therapist or something like that and see if you can get a little bit more mobility in that wrist. But typically, if you're getting it at 60 degrees, then you're good to go. There's no limitation there. But if you're only able to bend your wrist back maybe that much, maybe like 30 degrees or something like that, that's definitely a limitation that's going to make things difficult for you. You're typically going to have a hard time getting forward shaft lean. So yeah, you could see a physical therapist. Personally, I'm not, I don't know exercises that you can do to improve that. That's not my expertise. So I'd really recommend, a physical therapist or something like that. Somebody who's an expert in how that works, to be able to get you to where you're a little bit better, if that is the case. But if you're at 60 degrees, you're good to go. I wouldn't worry about that. But that's basically how you want to be at the top. And then as you're coming down, you want to have that as too. Now at the top, your lead wrist is going to be flat or slightly bowed. It really depends on your grip, actually. So if your grip is really, really strong, meaning I have my thumbs more on the side, on the back of the grip right here. At the top, you can actually have, you see, I have my right wrist completely bent back, but my lead wrist is actually a little bit cupped. You can see there, it's a little bit cupped. Whereas if I have more of a neutral grip, I would recommend having more of a flat wrist at the top. And then if you have a weak grip, I would try to have more of a bowed wrist at the top. Just because, as you can see there, the face orientation at the top was basically the same for all those. It's just that my grip was, stronger or weaker, so it really just depends on your grip. But I wouldn't recommend trying to feel like you're doing this like we talked about in the previous video. I wouldn't recommend trying to feel like as you come down to impact that you're going like this, because it's just too fast. You want to get to where this structure is already made. This face is essentially already square, and you can just turn through impact. And the club's just going to naturally kind of whip through there. That's the feeling that you want to have. If you're here at the top and then you're coming down, and then at the last second you feel like you've got to go like that, that's not what you want. And that might be why your wrists are hurting, is because you're trying to do something when things are moving really fast and you're putting a lot of strain on your wrist. You want to get this to where it doesn't take a lot. We're not trying to get you to get in a position like Dustin Johnson like this. We're trying to get you to where that face is pretty much already square. Dustin Johnson's actually going from here, and he's actually releasing that a little bit as he's going down, right? He's got very flexible wrists. He's basically creating, again, this angle here. This would be called wrist flexion, where we're bowing the wrist, right? This angle here is the same as this. We typically you're going to see about a 60-degree angle there in people who are, so you can see there, that's pretty close. It's maybe a little bit more than a 60-degree angle there that I'm able to bend my wrist down. I don't have any limitations in my wrists. I wouldn't say my wrists are super flexible by any means, but it's normal range of motion there for the most part, I would say. So no limitation there. I can't get my wrist in this kind of position at the top like Dustin Johnson. It's just not feasible for me. I tried it; it hurts my wrist. So that's not what we're trying to get you to do. We're trying to get you to be in a position where the face is already square, so that way you can turn and let that club kind of naturally whip through contact. If you get at the top of the swing and that face is open, you're going to have to make compensations in the downswing to get that face to close. And it's just going to make it more difficult for you. So highly recommend just getting into a good position at the top and not trying to do things, at the last second, because that's just going to make things more difficult. It's probably going to put unneeded strain on your wrists. My dog's back there snoring. So Stephen S. says, how do you feel about single length golf clubs? So that's a good question. I will tell you first and foremost, I'm not a club expert, but single length golf clubs to me just don't really make a lot of sense, because the whole point, at least from the surface, right? The whole point that I see of single length clubs is that you're going to feel like you're swinging the same club every time, right? So you can be very consistent, because your sand wedge is going to feel like your 7-iron. Your 5-iron is going to feel like your 7-iron, right? Because that's basically what they do. They take all your clubs, they make them 7-iron length, and then they put heads, different loft heads on them. Well, what happens is that if you just do that, if you were to just take a set of clubs and then put 7-iron shafts on them and then don't change anything about them, what happens is that your wedges are all going to go super high, because you've added speed. The length of the club a lot of times adds speed, because the longer, if you think about fan blades, right, the outer portions of the fan blades are going to be moving faster than the inner portions. Just like the reason why driver shaft lengths are longer is because you want to be able to swing your driver faster than you do your wedge. So what happens is that your wedges go super high, and then you go to your upper irons, like a 4-iron, a 5-iron, something like that, and they're shorter shafts, so they're going to go really low. So you get these trajectories that are way off. The way that variable length clubs are built is so that your trajectory, it looks like it's going higher at a faster rate, like your wedge is going to go higher at a faster rate, but it's essentially going just as high at its peak as all your other clubs, as your 7-irons, just because it looks like it's going so much higher, because it's going higher faster because it has more loft. So the peak, though, if you look on, if you go to PGA TrackMan averages, and you search that, you can find the numbers that for all the clubs, the average numbers for PGA Tour players. And if you look at the apex of all their shots, pretty much all of them are at around 100 feet, something like that. So that's what that's how variable clubs are built, is to be able to get that nice trajectory and have that good gapping between all your clubs. Single length clubs, that's not going to happen unless you change the weighting on the club. And again, I'm not an expert on this. This is just what I understand about it. But you have to change the weighting of the club. So I can't remember if you're adding weight or removing weight from your lower clubs and your higher clubs, but basically you have to change the weighting of the club in order to get it to be the right trajectory and have the right gapping. So at that point, now you're not swinging the same club, right? It feels different. Every club's going to feel different because you're not. It's not the same weight. It's a very different weighted club. I think what ends up happening is I think I can't remember exactly if they add weights to the wedges or remove weight, but either way, it's not the same club. So it kind of defeats the purpose for me, right? It defeats the purpose. And then, you're not going to have your driver be, the same length of your 7-iron or your 3-wood, right? Your fairway woods aren't going to be the same length. So you're not going to be swinging the same length club every single time because your other clubs aren't going to be the same either. So, that's one thing I don't really understand about it. But lastly, if I'm thinking with my wedges, right? So my wedges and, my low irons, these are typically the clubs that I'm trying to hit close to the hole, right? Those are my scoring clubs. So if those clubs are really long, which makes them harder to control, well, that kind of takes my control of it. And I think this might be partially a reason why Bryson is probably the reason why you're asking, because he's the one that's pretty much, he's the only one I know of on tour that's using single length clubs. But he uses single length clubs and he's an excellent player, but his wedge game is not good. I mean, it's not as good as, it doesn't match up to his other abilities, essentially. It's not a strong suit in his game. And I think it's largely because the shafts are 2 inches longer. It doesn't seem like that's much, but it does add, it's harder to hit. It's harder to hit your 7-iron than it is your wedge, largely because of the length of the club. So that's just what I think about it. I would love to try some. I've never actually hit some or tried some. Maybe I would become a believer, after that. But just the concept of it, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So, and we've actually had, I won't say who it was, but I had someone contact me and ask me, someone who makes single length clubs asked me if we would do a review on them. And I told him, send them over. I won't promise that we do a review because we won't, if someone sends us something, we won't just do a review because they sent it to us. Typically the way that it works is if it's great and we think it's going to help you all, we'll do a review on it and we'll show you, what it is, like the PRGR. We think it's a great device. Unfortunately, they're out of stock right now, but we think it's a great device and we think it's the best one out there for the money for sure. And it goes right along with what we do as far as the speed training and stuff like that. So we think it's really, really helpful for you. And the Impact Snap is another one. There's some training aids that we say are good, and we've got a lot of training aids that have been sent to us, and we don't do reviews on them. We're not going to say anything bad. We're not going to come out and make a video saying this training aid sucks. We just won't say anything at all. But anyway, I told them like, hey, I would love to try them. I'm interested in trying it. But if we don't like it, we won't make a review on it, and we don't send anything back. That's the other rule. We don't mess with sending it back. If you send it to us, we're keeping it. We're not going to go through the hassle of sending it back to you. And then they weren't interested in sending it to us. So they must not have been confident that we were going to be believers. So I'm not really sure, but yeah, I think the concept I think it's kind of a cool concept to think, yeah, I can be really, really consistent. But once you get into it and you kind of figure out, well, hey, this is going to happen if you do this and this and this, and then it becomes the whole purpose of the single length clubs is diminished. Now, I will say, if you're someone because you're going to be hitting a different club every time, no matter whether you use variable length clubs or if you use single length clubs. If you would rather have the weighting of the club be different every single time than the length of the club, then maybe single length clubs are for you. But again, you're still going to have your driver and your fairway woods probably be longer, because otherwise you won't hit your driver very far. If you have your driver the same length of a 7-iron, you're leaving massive yards on the table, because you could probably hit your driver pretty well if it was longer, and you'd be able to hit it longer too. If the shaft was longer, you'd probably be able to hit it further too. So just my 2 cents on that. But again, I don't have any experience with it, and I'm not an expert in clubs. I could be. There could be some misinformation there that I'm not sure of, but yeah, that's just my opinion on it. All right, so Michael H. So Michael H says, it seems like no matter what I do to change my address on the ball, I always seem to be hitting on the heel just below the hosel. Even if I back up a few inches, I still seem to hit it off the heel. What is most likely the primary reason for this? Forgot to add that that is primary with my driver. Some reason with my irons, it's opposite, hitting off the toe. So that makes a lot of sense, because just changing something. Now, a lot of times when I get people, they're hitting, let's say they're hitting shots off the heel. What they'll do is they'll actually go up to their shot and they'll line up with the ball on the toe. So if I have a ball heel, a lot of times they'll line up with that on the toe. Well, your brain knows that you're what's going on, so it thinks, well, if I come down and I swing in the same way, I'm going to hit it off the toe. So what do? You go out to it anyway, or you just kind of go out even more. So what I'd recommend doing with your driver, I would line up the way that you normally would, just the way that feels comfortable for you, and I would line up the way you normally would, and try to change your intention. So your intention is to hit it. You need to try to hit it off the toe. Try to hit it high on the toe, because you said you're hitting it kind of low on the heel. I try to hit it high on the toe. Intentionally try to hit it up here on your driver, way up on the toe and high on the toe. Because what you're doing is just adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. That's all you're trying to do. So right now you're trying to hit it in the center of the face, and what's happening is you're hitting it down here. So you need to try to hit it up here, and what will most likely happen, it will move that strike closer to the center of the face. And you need to keep doing that until you're actually starting to hit it high on the toe. Because I get this all the time. People, they'll do it, and then they hit it right in the center of the face, and then they go right back to the feeling of hit it in the center of the face. No, you have to keep trying to hit it in the toe. Because your feeling right now hasn't changed yet. So you got to keep doing it until your feel becomes real. Once your feel becomes real, then I would ease off the feeling. Now, let's say that you tried it and you still hit it off the heel, off the toe. You need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and exaggerate, because it's not comfortable to try to hit a bad shot. I know it doesn't make sense, but you got to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. So you got to get out of your comfort zone and exaggerate it as much as you need to move the strike. Now, if you actually do hit it on the toe and high on the toe, then I would just ease off of the feeling a little bit. You just overdid it. You did an awesome job making change there. You just overdid it a little bit. Same thing with your iron. On the toe, I would try to hit it off the heel until you actually start hitting it off the heel. Same kind of thing. So just change your intent, adjust your feel to get the desired result, and it should make a big difference for you. As far as things in your swing, it's hard to say. We can go over a couple things that are typically happening. So if you're hitting it off the toe, it's usually from coming over the top, kind of like this, coming over the top. It's typically what's going on. If you're hitting it off the heel, it's typically the opposite, right? Swinging from the inside, and also the hips moving toward the target, toward the golf ball, because that takes away place for your hands. So then you'll end up hitting it off the heel. So I'd look at those things in your swing, and if you're coming over the top, right, then I would try to feel like you're swinging more from the inside. If you're swinging way too much from the inside, then I'd try to feel like you're coming over the top. A lot of this is just adjusting the feel to get the desired result that you want. That's a lot of what golf is. If you're off, you just need to adjust your feel to get the desired result. We call it fault, feel, reel. So the fault is a heel strike. So the feel is to hit it off the toe. The reel is that you hit it in the center of the face, and you keep doing it until your feel becomes real. Carlos C says, I'm working on the move. When I bow my left wrist to square the club face, my elbow just tucks in automatically to shallow on my plane. Awesome. I don't need to consciously turn the doorknob. Is it okay for me to do, or you think of this anyway? As long as you're getting the club on the plane. So let's talk about this a little bit. I get this question all the time where people ask me, am I consciously doing this? Am I consciously doing that? Am I actively doing this? Do I have to think about doing this, or is it automatic? So what you have to think about is, if you look at your swing and you're doing what comes naturally to you, and you're doing what you want to do, then that's automatic, right? There's no thought, there's no conscious thought. You're in what's called unconscious, hopefully competence, right? Unconscious competence at that stage, which means that you don't have to think about it and you're doing it correctly, right? So now, if you find yourself, you're looking at your swing, right? You're looking at your swing and maybe you're coming down steep and that's what feels natural to you, then you're going to need to, if you want that to change, you're going to have to think about it. You're going to have to consciously think about it. So you went from unconscious incompetence, which is where you're unaware that anything is going on and you're not doing it correctly. And then finally you know, okay, I need to shallow the club. Now you're aware that there's something you need to do. So you have conscious incompetence, and then eventually you're going to move into what's called conscious competence, which is where you have to think about it and you're doing it correctly. And then you move into, once you do that enough times, it becomes automatic. It becomes ingrained. This is why we have lots of reps in the Top Speed Golf system. And you move into what's called unconscious competence. That's the ideal. That's where you want to get to. So if you look at your swing and you're getting this club to shallow out, you're getting it on plane earlier in the swing. Like I talked about earlier, I talked about that elbow plane. You're seeing that club. By the time the lead arm gets parallel to the ground, you're seeing that club either parallel to or a little bit shallower to that plane. Now, we don't want it way over here. That would be way too shallow. That's too far off plane. And we don't want it like this. We want it, if you draw that line, you want it to be parallel or slightly shallower to it. And you want those hands to be on that line or close to that line, moving onto the line as your hands get to about waist level. That's what you want to see. If you see that, then you're in good shape. There isn't anything you're going to consciously need to do. You're already turning the doorknob automatically, right? If you're already in the position, you don't need to think about, okay, I need to turn my doorknob to make it happen. It's like, it's like if you were working through the power turn course, right? And your shoulder turn looked like this, it already looked good. You don't need to think anymore about turning your shoulders because it's something that's automatically happening for you. It's the same kind of thing. So if you look on your swing and you're already doing it, the club's where you want it to be, then you don't need to think about it to get it to do anymore, because you're actually you might be making it worse, right? If you have to think about turning the doorknob even more, you may end up over here and end up over shallowing the club. It's like if I went to a tour player who's already doing the move. It's like if I went to like Brooks Koepka and said, let's work on the move. Well, he's already doing it. There's nothing that he needs to really learn there. It's already happening. It's automatic for him. All right. So Gary L says, should the move be used for all shots, including those from 100 yards in pitch shots? Yes. So just to go back to what the move actually is, getting the club on plane as soon as possible in the downswing and getting the club as square as soon as possible in the downswing. So that way you can kind of turn through there. So that's essentially what it is. That's what you're trying to do. So on a pitch shot, you just don't really need to do as much shallowing in the pitch shot, because the club's already, if you're only bringing the club back to here, it's already pretty much on the plane. So there's not a lot of shallowing that you have to do. Now, maybe you're someone who brings the club up like this, then yeah, definitely you're going to have to. But most people on pitch shots are bringing that club pretty much back on plane and back down on plane. It's mainly a straight back and straight through kind of thing. So there's typically not a lot of opening of the face that happens in the backswing and getting above the plane in the backswing because your swing isn't getting long enough to need to do that. So you're already, most people are already pretty much doing the move in there. Now, if you're someone who's really opening the face like this, which I see all the time, people take pitch shots and they really, really open the face, then yeah, you're going to need to really turn that handle as you're coming in. So that way, because if you don't, you're probably going to flip to square the face at impact. Now, if you're trying to hit a high pitch shot, that might be all right to release the club a little bit early. But if you're trying to hit nice controlled pitch shots that like we see the tour players make, where it kind of skids on the green and then it comes to a complete stop like that, you need to have some forward shaft lean when you do that. And it's going to be hard to get that if you're having to make a compensation at the end to get that club to square up, which typically involves flipping the club, right? But yes, you're doing the move on everything. You're trying to get the club as square and on plane as soon as possible in the downswing. So Dominic P says, how do you play out of a packed down sand greenside bunker? Good question. So typically in a normal bunker shot, you're setting up with the face very, very open, right? So 45 degrees open. The reason why you want to do that is so that we can have this club glide through the sand. So our wedges have this chunk of metal here on the bottom called the bounce. And when you open the face, right, it makes that, basically it raises this leading edge and it makes it so that this is contacting the sand first, this bottom chunk of the club. If to kind of visualize how this works, you think about a water skier, right? So if there's a water skier, it's got the nose of the skis up, right? That allows it to glide on top of the water. That's the same thing as this leading edge. If we have this leading edge up, we got the bounce hitting the sand first, it's going to glide through the sand. But if we get that nose down of the ski, right, it's going to dive into the water. The same thing. If we get this leading edge going down into the sand and contacting the sand first, it's going to dive into the sand. It's going to get lost in the sand, and you're not going to be able to get the ball out of there, right? So the easiest way is to open the face a bunch. I'd say about 45 degrees. I try to feel like the face is pointing straight up to the sky. Most people don't open up the face enough on these shots. So about 45 degrees open. So if you take the club, you have it straight up and down with your normal grip, then I would take the club and twist it to where it's 45 degrees open. You lay that down, and then what you're trying to do, you play the ball a little bit forward in the stance. So about right in that area, wide open, and then you're going to try to hit that sand, a few inches behind the golf ball. So like 3 to 6 inches behind the golf ball is typically going to result in a pretty good shot. So that's your typical bunker shot. But if the sand is packed, what can happen is, if it's wet, hard, concrete, packed sand, not all of these bunkers are going to be created equal. So, it is a hazard. So it's not supposed to be super easy. You're supposed to be penalized a little bit for it. But sometimes being in a bunker is better than being in the rough, depending on where you're at, because you can at least probably get some spin on it. But anyway, depending on the bunker, you're going to have to kind of play it by feel. One way to kind of play it by feel, and you often see this in tour players, is they dig the feet into the sand. It gives it, if you're digging your feet in the sand and it's just like crunchy hard, what I'd recommend doing is you open up the face a little bit less. So instead of 45 degrees open, maybe you'd open up the face, about 25, 30 degrees, and then you'll actually hit a little bit closer to the golf ball. And what that will allow the club to do is it will allow it to dig a little bit into the sand. You also may want to hit down on it a little bit, so come down a little bit steeply. So typically in a normal bunker shot, you're trying to come in shallow and get this club to glide through the sand. But if it's really, really hard sand, then you need this club to get into the sand a little bit. And to do that, that's why we open up the face a little bit less. That's why we hit a little bit closer to the golf ball. Because if you do that same method in a normal sand bunker, if you do that same method, what will happen is on hard sand, this club, you'll hit the ground, 4 or 5 inches behind the golf ball, it'll bounce off the sand and hit the golf ball, and you're sculling it over the green. So to get rid of that, you open the face a little bit less, something about 30 degrees. You hit a little bit closer to the golf ball, an inch or two behind the golf ball. You won't swing quite as hard, and you'll also hit more down on it to get it to dig into the sand a little bit, because you want to have the bounce. You don't want to just come in here with the leading edge and go like that, because it's just it will dig. You'll end up digging into it, even though it's like concrete. But you're not going to get that good feeling out of there. Typically, I prefer packed sand bunkers. I think they're easier to hit out of. They're much easier to control because it's a less of a swing. You're hitting a little bit closer to the golf ball, so you're actually getting a little bit of the golf ball. Whereas like a fluffy sand bunker, you're hitting basically all the sand, and the sand's throwing it out. Whereas with this, it's more you're hitting the sand, but your club's kind of stopping on top of the sand, and then the ball is going to come up out. So it just takes some practice. One way you can practice it is to just bring a bucket of water with you to the range. If it's fluffy sand, put some water in there. Go if it pours down rain for a while. Right after that, go out to your practice facility and work in there to get a better sense and feel of it. But that's all you're trying to do, is you're just making adjustments to try to get the club to dig a little bit, so that way it's a little bit easier to get out of those packed sand bunkers. So opening up the club a little bit less to expose a little less bounce, hitting a little bit closer to the golf ball, and hitting a little bit down into the golf ball. And you may need to do that to varying degrees depending on how hard or packed the sand is. You may not need to make much of a difference. You may just need to open up the face a little bit less and hit just a little bit closer to the golf ball if it's just a wet sand bunker, and it will work out perfectly. It just takes some practice to get some feel for it. All right. So the move, Timothy D says, the move is great. I'm shifting weight and shallowing the club, but now I seem to be swinging everything through at once. Very stiff looking move. Need to get my arms to whip through. Is there a drill to regain the arm swing while retaining the body movements? Tim, it's hard to say exactly what's going on, but if you're getting everything to swing through at once, meaning from what I'm gathering from your question, it sounds like your hips and your shoulders are kind of moving through together. So what you need to have happen is what's called right side bend. Right side bend. So you may be doing the move, right, but you're going like this. So I would try to get what's called right side bend, and that's where if my hips are level here and I tilt like this, my shoulder's getting closer to my hip socket. That's right side bend there. So that's what I want to have. As I'm coming down, I want to have right side bend. If you look from this angle, I'm getting right side bend, and that's getting to where my hips can open up, but my shoulders, my body is not opening up. My chest isn't opening up as much with it, right? So that's allowing me to get this club to work from the inside and allowing it to whip through there, because I'm getting the momentum of my hips, and then I'm getting the momentum of my rib cage, and I'm getting my arms in the club swinging through there. So focus on that side bend, feeling like you have side bend as you're coming into contact, and that should help you to get the hips rotating open with the shoulders square to slightly open at impact. So David S. says, I have a torn tendon in my left ankle. Ooh, doesn't sound like fun. What can I do to minimize the rolling over my left ankle and not cause problems with my knee? I just open your foot at address. So I just have your foot more open at address. I mean, you may want to set up kind of like this where it's 45 degrees open. So that way you can come all the way around like that. So that's all I would do, is I just open that lead foot up a bunch. So Andrew S. says, okay, thanks, Q. So Clay mentions bowing the left wrist at the beginning of the downswing. You think it's okay to set that wrist at the top of the backswing and then hold that till just before impact? Also, all right, so let me answer that first. So the idea here is that we want to create this structure at the top so that the face is essentially already square. So as you're coming down, you want that to be squaring up as you're coming down. So that way you can, it gets square as soon, because it's typically not going to be square right at the top. It's typically going to be a little bit open, and then you got to square it a little bit, or you can have it already a little bit square and then just turn. It just depends. Everyone's a little bit different, but I recommend just getting it square as soon as you possibly can in the downswing. So if that's at the top, great. If your wrists are flexible enough to do that, it's not easy to do. There's a reason why not every tour player does it, because it's not easy to do. It's not a natural thing to have that face like this at the top, right? It's more natural for most players to kind of go like that as they're coming down, to already kind of be getting that face square as they're coming down. That's what I recommend doing. And then he goes on to say, also, you're releasing your wrist through impact. Should your right palm always be pointed towards the ground as you move through impact? So basically, your right wrist at the top is going to be fully extended back, and then as you start down, it's going to kind of stay like that until you get to about right here, and then you're releasing it like that. So you're going to be going from right wrist really bent back to more like this. It's releasing, and then you go in the straight line release. It's completely straight once you get into the straight line release. So the way I can the best way to describe it is if I were to take this ball and I were to throw it sidearm, right? So if I were to throw this sidearm, you can see my wrist is bent back. If I were to have it like this and throw it, I wouldn't have much on it, right? I need to have my wrist bent back, and then I'm releasing it as I'm going through. It's the same thing when you're swinging the golf club. With the golf club, you're coming in, it's bent back, and then you're releasing it as you're going through. So, but the right palm is going to be pointed not down toward the golf ball like that, but it's going to be at impact. It's going to be more, out in front a little bit. But it could be a good feeling to feel like it's pointed down toward the golf ball as you're coming down, even though that's not going to be the reality of what's going on. Again, feel is not real, right? All right, so Spencer L says, I cannot keep my arms in front of my body on the downswing, even when it feels like my lower body is still, I still get stuck. So I cannot keep my arms in front of my body on the downswing, even when it feels like my lower body is still, I get stuck. Why is that? So you don't want your arms in front of you. If your arms are in front of your body like this, then you're going to be flipping and releasing the club early. You actually want the arms kind of behind you, the club and everything more behind you. If you look, if I show you, if I get my hips square here, so let me get into an impact position. There we go. And then I'm going to square my hips to the camera here. You can see my hips are pointed that way. Let me actually square to the camera here. My hips are pointed toward the camera, but the club is my arms are actually behind me. So you want the club behind you. It's hard to say exactly what's going on in your swing without seeing it, but you want the club behind you at impact. That's what the best players are doing. If the club is in front of you, you're typically flipping, early extension, things like that. So I would say it sounds like you're in the right place, but it's hard to say without seeing your swing. So Jeff P says, is there any tips or resources for understanding putting speed, pace? Also, how can you improve reading greens? I just it's mainly feel is what you get for understanding speed and things like that. So what I recommend is something called the ladder drill. It's probably the best drill for speed out there. So basically what you're doing, if I grab a couple balls here, what you're doing is I would just have like a tee that's like 30 feet away. And then I would take your first ball and I would try to putt it as close as you can to that tee, but not past it, right? If you go past it, you got to start over. So you put it as close as you can to the tee. And now that ball, the ball that you just put it out there, you got to put it as close as you, and the line doesn't matter on this. We're just trying to get it as close to it as we can without going past it. So now I'm going to take it and I'm going to try and get this to go, nope, I don't know, should be, yeah, you can see that. So I actually ended up hitting it. So that would be past it. So now I have to start over. I only got one. So if you just do this constantly, you're going to get a much better feel. So again, if I go right here, I have that tee out there. I'm going to put it as short as I can from that tee. And then on the next one, I'm going to try and put it to that ball, but not past it. So there, All right, so that was a pretty good one there. I got it. I'm not sure if you can quite see that, but I got it. It didn't touch it, and I didn't get past it. So that's about as good as I can do right there. Now I grab this one, and I'm going to try and put it just short of that one. This actually works better if you have 3 balls. So now I'm going to try and put it. I've got 2 right now, and I'm going to try and put it to that one close enough without going past it. So that one got up to about a foot. So now I'm at 3. Now, again, I'm going to go back to that same place where I was, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to try to put it up to that ball, but not past it. I got it up to about 6 inches. Now I'm going to take this one. Now I'm putting it. You get the idea. I would do that. That's going to help you get a much, much better feel for the speed of the greens. That's the best speed drill out there, I think. I think that's the best speed drill for sure. A lot of what putting is also, that's great for getting a sense of the speed, but you also, putting is matching line and speed. Like, so if you have a breaking putt, you can hit it firm with less break, or you can kind of die it in the hole and play a lot more break. So you can do some drills where you're kind of working on that. So I would take 3 balls out there, and I would just go to a hole that has a little bit of break on it. And then on the first one, it doesn't really matter which order you go in, but you can go in any order you want. But on the first one, I would just try to go hit it with a pace that would go, let's say you would hit it with a pace that would go a foot to a foot and a half by the hole. That's like perfect pace, right? So a foot to a foot and a half by the hole. That's the pace that you want on this first one. So I would try this first putt, and I would see the break, and I'd match my line with I hit the putt to where it would go. So you can see that one there. I missed it a little bit to the left. It's okay if you miss it, but we're just trying to get the line of the putt. Obviously, you want to make it. You're trying to make it, but you're trying to match to get the good line and the speed. So that there, let's say that this is pretty flat, but let's say that this was a breaking to the left putt. Well, that means that I hit it a foot to a foot and a half by the hole. It went a foot past it, essentially. That means I just underplayed the break a little bit because I missed it to the left. So on this one, let's say that I'm going to let's say I'm going to hit this one firm. So I'm going to hit this 2 to 3 feet by the hole. All right. So that line that I just had on that putt might work for this one, because if I would have hit that firmer, it may have went in. So on that one, that's going to be, so you can see there, when you hit it harder, you got to pretty much hit it dead in the center of the face. You can see I kind of caught the lip. I don't think actually you can't over there. And it was a right to left putt. Well, you got to kind of find what the break is. I would just hit this putt a couple times and find kind of what the break is for a putt that would go one to a foot and a half. So 12 to 16 inches or 12 to 18 inches by the hole. And then I put 2 tees in the ground. They're about 2 balls wide. So 2 balls wide would be, I put a tee in the ground. There are 2 tees in the ground. That's about 2 balls wide. So that's going to give you enough space for the ball to work through there. And what I would do is I would count how many total putts it would take for me to make one going through the tees, above the tees, and below the tees. Now, obviously, if it's a right to left putt, excuse me, if it's a right to left putt, if I'm going underneath the tees, I'm going to need to hit it harder, right? That's going to be my 2 to 3 foot by putt. If I'm going above the tees, I'm going to have to hit it a lot softer so it can break down into the hole. So you just count how many reps it takes you. So let's say you do it, it takes you 20 reps. Well, I would do it again, and I try to beat that score, right? So you're constantly, these are kind of games that you're constantly trying to compete against yourself. Now, as far as reading greens is concerned, the best way to do it is to find where the uphill and the downhill putt are relative, to the hole. So I find where that right to left, where that straight uphill and straight downhill putt is, and then your ball in relationship to that you should have an idea of what way it's going to break. So let's say I'm putting right here. I'm putting to my door over there. That's the hole, and the straight uphill putt is right there. So I know that this is going to be a little bit uphill, right? Because I'm just kind of to the left of this. It's going to be a little bit uphill, and it's going to break a little bit left to right. Now the amount, we'll go over that here in a minute, but I know that that's what's going to happen. let's say that that's a downhill, that's a straight downhill putt. Well, I know that this one's going to be downhill, so it's going to be a little bit faster, and it's going to be a little bit right to left, right? So now the amount of break, what I recommend doing is I like to get a sense in my feet for what's happening. So I'll walk the length of I'll walk around the hole. So basically I'll walk up to the hole and then walk around the other side. The other thing that you'll look at when you go up there is you'll see where the grain is growing. So on one side of the cup, it should look pretty clean. Depending on how grainy your greens are. If you have very grainy greens, it'll look really clean on one side and kind of rough on the other side. The side that's rough, that's the direction that the grain is growing in. So typically, if it's a right to left putt, the grain isn't going to make a huge difference, especially if it's very fast greens. If it's on slow greens, it may make a small difference. It may make it break just a hair more or a hair less if it's kind of going into the grain. The main difference where it makes is uphill and downhill putts, because that grain is into it the whole time or with it the whole time. So you may get a putt where it's down grain. And if you're down grain, it may be quite a bit faster than what you think. And if it's into the grain, it may end up being a little bit shorter than what you think. But if it's really, really fast greens, it may not make much of a difference. But I know most of you aren't playing, tour caliber greens. I know I'm not either. So the grain makes a little bit more of a difference there. There's going to be a difference between an into the grain putt, a little bit more of a difference in an into the grain putt versus a with grain putt. But that you can also see that when you walk up there. So I kind of walk around feeling in my feet all the way up to the hole and then all the way back. I'm getting a sense for what that is. And then I'll actually get behind the hole, roughly about 15, 20 feet behind the hole, and I'll get down and I'll kind of look. And a big mistake that I see people make is they read the green where their ball is not going to be rolling. So they'll read the green kind of past the hole and they'll see a slope kind of behind the hole. Well, that's not where your ball is rolling. And they'll kind of see something that's rolling, going up to it too. You're just interested in what's happening between your ball. And I know that seems obvious, but I see it all the time. And it's something you may be doing inadvertently, but you want to make sure that you're not doing that. If you want to practice getting a sense and feel for, feeling things with your feet, because not everyone's going to be good at that, but a way that you kind of build your skill with that is you can download an app on your phone. I can't remember what it's called, but it'll read the grade of the green, and you can basically stand on the green and guess what grade it is, right, to get a sense and feel for it. And then you can put your phone on the green, and it'll read it, and you can kind of adjust based on what's happening there. So that's the best way to do it. Really, when you see people that are really, really good putters or green readers, it's mostly because they've played the course a million times and they know all the breaks in the greens. It's not something that they're like an expert green reader. It's mostly probably because they have played there so many times that they have a sense and feel for what everything does and how much it breaks here and so on and so forth. But the Top Speed Golf putting system would be where you'd want to go to find more resources for putting. All right, so I can take one more question. I do have a meeting here, so I do have to go. So real quickly, Fred K says, how could I improve my balance? I find myself falling forward. The follow through, sometimes my right leg will slip out wearing good golf shoes. I'm a righty. So you need to get a good weight shift. So in the backswing, you're basically never in balance, but you're always making an adjustment so that you can kind of not fall over essentially. So in the backswing, you're getting into your right side, right? And you're pushing off there. If I wasn't doing that, I would just go like this, right? So you got to push there, and then you got to get the weight shift to the lead side. So if you're on your right foot, if you're slipping your right foot, that's probably because you're coming over the top, right? Because you have to have something to kind of push off of if you're not getting your weight shift. So I focus on getting that good weight shift. The step drill is a really good one. I'd recommend checking out a video. It's called How to Start the Downswing. Search for it, BR014, BR014. That's the video that you want. Select that video and search it in the upper right-hand corner. Sorry to be abrupt, but I have a meeting that's starting like right now, so I gotta go. But thanks everybody for joining me. Everybody have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you all next time.